Seraphine Vane had never once shifted into her wolf form, not at 15, when every other young wolf in Ironvale Pack celebrated their first change beneath a full moon, not at 18, when it became embarrassing, not at 23, when it became a crime. The pack had a word for what she was: cursed. She stood in the center of Ironvale's great hall with stone floors beneath her feet and torchlight flickering across the faces of every wolf she had ever known. They were all watching her, not with anger exactly, with relief. The kind of relief people feel when they finally have permission to let go of something they were afraid of. Alpha Goran sat at the far end of the hall in his heavy chair, his thick arms resting on the stone armrests, his expression carefully arranged into something that looked like authority. His beta read the charges aloud. 3 wolves who had spent extended time near Seraphine had experienced disrupted shifts, violent nightmares, and unexplained aggression. She carried no wolf scent of her own. She had never shifted. She was, the beta concluded, a vessel of bad fortune, a danger to the pack simply by existing. Seraphine listened to all of it without moving. When the beta finished, she looked directly at Alpha Goran. She said 3 words. "You know why." Goran's jaw tightened. He raised his fist and brought it down on the armrest. "Exile," he announced. "The Ashbourne Wastes, effective at dawn." The hall filled with the sound of exhaled breath, shuffling feet, quiet murmurs of agreement. Nobody protested. Nobody spoke in her defense. She had not expected anyone to. She was given a worn pack, a single canteen, and a knife that had not been sharpened in years. 2 enforcers walked her to the border of Ironvale territory at dawn without speaking. At the tree line, they stopped. She kept walking. The Ashbourne Wastes were not a place people described in pleasant terms. The soil was black and dense. The trees grew at strange angles, as though they had spent centuries leaning away from something. The silence was the kind that pressed against the ears. Seraphine walked for 3 hours before her legs gave out. She sat down against a large split boulder and stared at nothing for a long moment. Then she allowed herself to feel the anger she had been holding in her chest since the night before. Not sadness, not fear. Pure, wordless anger at a world that had decided what she was before she ever had a chance to show them otherwise. She did not notice the old woman until the old woman spoke. "You lasted longer than I expected." Seraphine's head snapped up. Standing at the edge of a dead oak tree was a woman who could have been anywhere between 60 and 100 years old, studying her the way a craftsman studies unfinished material. Her name was Elder Marin. She had been living in the wastes for decades, exiled from the larger wolf world for reasons she described simply as knowing too much. She asked Seraphine questions, specific, pointed questions about her earliest memories, about whether she had ever felt something beneath her ribs during moments of strong emotion, about what she dreamed during full moons. Seraphine answered carefully at first, then honestly. There had always been something, a pressure behind her chest, deep and constant, like something very large pressing against the inside of a locked door. Marin sat across from her and spoke plainly. Seraphine was not cursed. She was sealed. There was an important difference. A cursed wolf was something broken. A sealed wolf was something hidden, deliberately, by the moon goddess herself, because what she carried was too powerful to release without a specific trigger. The wolves near her had not been harmed. They had been destabilized. They were ordinary wolves reacting to proximity with something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. Their instincts knew what she was, even if their minds could not name it. What Seraphine carried had a name: Origin Wolf. Once in many generations, the moon goddess reintroduced pure, ancient wolf essence into the world through a single individual. Origin wolves were not simply powerful. They were the original source from which all alpha bloodlines had descended. In the truest hierarchy of wolfkind, they stood above alphas entirely, not through aggression or dominance, but through essence. The seal required a specific trigger to break. It required recognition from a bonded alpha whose wolf was powerful enough to receive the full weight of what Seraphine carried without being destroyed by it. There was only one wolf on the continent who qualified: the Alpha King's wolf, a great black wolf named Vorn. Seraphine sat very still and said nothing for a long time. She did not trust Marin, but she had nowhere else to go, and the old woman had just described the locked door behind her sternum better than Seraphine had ever been able to describe it herself. She stayed. Maren trained her every morning, hand-to-hand combat, since a wolf who could not shift had to be twice as effective in her own body. Seraphine was not naturally talented. She was disciplined. She learned through repetition and through pain, and she did not complain about either. 2 weeks into the wastes, 4 rogue wolves came through their camp at night, looking for easy prey. They smelled Omega, and decided she was exactly that. The fight that followed was not clean or graceful. Seraphine took a hard hit early that knocked her into a tree. She got up. She fought small and precise, targeting joints and weak points, using the knife, using the terrain. She brought down 3 of them, the 4th left. When it was over, she was bleeding from a cut along her collarbone. She looked up at Maren, who had watched the entire thing without moving. Maren nodded once. It was the closest thing to praise Seraphine had received in years. Far from the wastes, at the sovereign citadel, the Alpha King was managing a different kind of problem. Kael Draveth had ruled the Wolf continent for 6 years. He was 30 years old, broad-shouldered, and covered in the quiet scars of a man who had seen a great deal of violence and survived all of it. He did not rule through cruelty, but he ruled without softness. His decisions were precise and final, and the wolves around him had long since learned not to present him with information they were not prepared to act on. His wolf, Vorn, had gone almost completely silent 3 years ago. Not weak, simply still, unresponsive to the formal bond checks that Kael performed regularly. It was as though Vorn was waiting for something, and nothing that existed in Kael's current world qualified. In the council chamber, spread intelligence maps told a disturbing story. 6 packs along the eastern and western corridors had gone dark. Scouts sent to investigate had not returned. The force responsible called itself the Ash Crown Dominion, led by a figure known only as the Unbonded. He had developed a method of severing wolves from their existing pack bonds and forcibly rebonding them to himself. It was, in effect, a way of building an army out of stolen wolves. Kael sent his most trusted commander, Drex, east to gather more information. Then he stood at his window after the council cleared and felt Vorn move inside him for the first time in months. The wolf was not responding to the war news. He was orienting toward a direction. Northwest. The direction of the Ashbourne Wastes. Kael dismissed it. He had enough to manage. But Vorn did not stop. Over the following days, the pull came again and again, growing less subtle each time. It was not a distress signal. It was not aggression. It was recognition. The deep, bone-level certainty of a wolf who has located something he has been waiting for, without knowing he was waiting. When Drex returned with confirmation that the Dominion was advancing westward, Kael made a decision that his council found difficult to understand. He would ride out personally to assess the western territories. He took a small unit. He went northwest. He found her campfire 3 hours into the wastes. Through the trees, in a clearing, a young woman sat sharpening a blade against a flat stone with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned that preparation was the only thing standing between herself and the next problem. She had gray eyes and a bandage at her collarbone, and an expression of complete calm that was clearly not the calm of someone who felt safe, but the calm of someone who had stopped requiring safety. Kael stopped walking. Vorn did not stir. He erupted. 3 years of waiting released themselves in a single instant, and the bond signal that hit Kael was nothing like what he had expected. He had heard alphas describe the mate recognition. None of the descriptions had been adequate. It was not warmth. It was not attraction. It was the specific, undeniable sensation of a missing piece of something enormous, locking into place. He stood very still and breathed through it. Seraphine had already looked up. She saw a tall, scarred man standing at the edge of her clearing in the dark, and she felt the seal behind her sternum respond immediately, the locked door beginning to strain against its hinges with more force than it ever had before. She stood up. She did not run. Their first conversation was not gentle. She was not impressed by his name, which clearly surprised him. He asked who she was and what she was doing in the wastes. She told him she had been exiled, that she was not a threat, and that he was free to leave. He studied her with the patient focus of someone who had already decided not to leave and was simply giving her the courtesy of completing her sentence. Elder Marin stepped out of the shadows and addressed Kale directly. She asked him one question. Had his wolf gone silent 3 years ago? Kale's expression shifted, just slightly. Yes. Marin told him what Seraphine was. She did not perform it. She stated it plainly, the way one names a geographic formation. Kale listened without interrupting. When she finished, Seraphine watched his face and saw the exact moment he stopped processing it as information and started processing it as strategy. She saw him calculate what an unsealed origin wolf could mean against the Ash-Crown Dominion. She respected that. She understood it. Don't mistake this for submission, she said, before he had offered a single word about his intentions. I'm not coming because you're a king. I'm coming because we want the same thing. He looked at her steadily. And what's that? To stop anyone who thinks they can own wolves. He considered her for a moment. Then he turned and walked back toward the Wast's border, and she fell into step beside him, and that was that. Her arrival at the Sovereign Citadel caused immediate and significant disruption. The Alpha King had returned with an Omega, an exiled, packless Omega, with no wolf form and no political standing. The council representatives were vocally unhappy. One called it an embarrassment to the throne. Seraphine walked through the Citadel's main gates and noted every face that showed contempt and every wolf that stepped back from her proximity. She filed the information and said nothing. She appeared on the training grounds the following dawn without being invited. When a senior enforcer challenged her, she put him on the ground in under a minute, using the precise, efficient technique Marin had drilled into her across weeks of morning combat. The training ground went quiet. She helped the enforcer up, returned the sparring staff, and walked away. Commander Drex observed all of it and said nothing, but she caught him watching, and he knew she caught him, and they arrived at an unspoken understanding. She was being evaluated, and she was entirely comfortable with that. When the Ash-Crown Dominion sent its formal message to the Citadel, 5 days to surrender or face absorption, the council fractured along political lines within minutes. Some wanted to negotiate, some wanted to fight. The room grew louder and less useful with each passing exchange. Seraphine, sitting in the back of the room where she had not been formally invited, waited until the argument reached its loudest peak. Then she spoke at a normal volume, and somehow everyone heard her. She asked where the unbonded slept during an active absorption push. The room went quiet. She explained the reasoning. The unbonded's method required his physical presence within a certain range of the wolves he was absorbing. Remove him from the chain, at the moment of an active absorption, and every forcibly rebonded wolf on the continent would fracture loose simultaneously. The army would not be defeated in the traditional sense. It would simply stop existing as a unified force. Not because they were beaten soldier by soldier, but because the one wolf holding them together was gone. Kale looked at her across the chamber, the way he looked at Drex, when Drex handed him exactly the intelligence he needed. She met his eyes and did not look away. Build the plan around that, he told his council. The strike unit deployed at dawn 2 days later. Seraphine was among them. The Dominion's forward force met them on the flatlands west of the Citadel. The plan moved well, until the unbonded saw her. He recognized what she was before she fully recognized herself. She saw the fear cross his face, and then she felt his absorption power launch outward like a physical thing, aimed directly at the half-formed bond between her and Vorn. If he severed it before it sealed completely, the origin essence inside her would not simply disappear, it would rupture outward. It hit her like a wall. The locked door did not strain. It broke. The seal dissolved the way very old things dissolve, not dramatically, but completely. One moment it existed, and then it simply did not, and what filled the space where it had been was not describable in ordinary terms. Silver light moved through her skin and outward. The ground beneath her feet darkened. Every wolf on the battlefield stopped moving. Every single one. Because every wolf on that field, regardless of which side they were on, carried somewhere in their oldest instincts the knowledge of what they were looking at. Her wolf form arrived after 23 years of silence. She was enormous. Her fur was silver white, and her eyes were the color of full moonlight, and she did not charge or roar. She simply stood. The unbonded's connection to his army snapped. 6 packs worth of forcibly held wolves came loose at once. and the shockwave of it dropped him to one knee. His soldiers did not run. They simply stopped, bewildered, like people waking from a long and confusing sleep. Kale found him shortly after. The fight was brief. Drex took his surrender before it became permanent, because a living source of information was more useful than a statement. The battlefield went quiet. 2 months later, the 6 absorbed packs began the slow process of rebuilding themselves. The unbonded was tried under wolf law at the Citadel. Alpha Goran of Ironvale quietly stepped down and was replaced. A formal delegation from Ironvale arrived at the Citadel, and could not quite bring themselves to make eye contact with the woman they had once escorted to the edge of the wastes, with a dull knife and a canteen. Elder Marin returned to the Ashbourne Wastes. Before she left, she told Seraphine one last thing. The moon goddess had not sealed her to protect the world from her. She had sealed her to protect her from a world that was not yet ready. Seraphine stood at the border of the wastes in morning light and watched the old woman disappear into the trees. She did not call after her. She stood there for a while, with a silver wolf she was still learning to live inside, and a bond she had chosen rather than inherited, and she thought about how strange it was that the same world that had once decided she was cursed was now the world she had just helped hold together. She had not done it for the recognition. She had not done it for a title. She had done it because someone had to, and she happened to be the one who could. That felt like more than enough.